Welcome to the first episode of our new series, Two Hard Questions. In this episode, Eric, Jesse and I interview Canadian journalist Barbara Kay on the subject of anti-feminism. We all had a great time recording this, and I think it shows in the video. I hope you get a lot out of it too.
Thanks, Gerard, for the introduction. I've been writing for a national newspaper, the National Post it's called, which is one of Canada's two national newspapers. The other is the Globe and Mail. And for 20 years now, 17 as a regular columnist, a weekly columnist. And at the time, I had not thought a great deal about feminism. I had seen it as a reform movement that had been actually very good for women in terms of getting them equal legal rights, educational rights, that sort of thing. I hadn't really examined it very closely, but it came to my attention very early in my writing career that because of feminism, that certain iniquities were happening to boys and men in society. And I started thinking about social forces, cultural forces a great deal because that sort of became my niche. So one of the first things that came to my attention was the issue of domestic violence, which I had not researched very thoroughly until it became an issue for me. And I had spoken to some men who had suffered domestic violence. Once I started doing my research, I was really quite surprised to learn that domestic violence was in fact a bilateral affliction in society, that it was not, as most people believe, strictly a problem for women, but it does happen to men as well. But what I noticed immediately when I started writing about these things was the pushback was incredible. It was just, no, you're wrong. This is, if you write about this, if you speak about boys and men having a problem with domestic violence or intimate partner violence, then you are hurting women's causes. You are hurting women. And I realized almost immediately that feminists see social causes, or they see their own cause, as a zero-sum game. If you point out that there are injustices to men or boys, that this is actually hurting women. And I thought, well, how can this be? How can you feel that to point out that boys and men have problems is in fact taking something away from women's problems? Why can't both people have problems? Why can't both men and women have problems and we can discuss them, So that was my first indication that this idea of the zero-sum game, if you have a cause that you really believe is just, then it shouldn't bother you that other people also have injustices perpetrated against them. So then I realized that this was an ideology that was very similar and derived from Marxism, which also sees all of life as a zero-sum game in which it's a struggle for power. And there's a villain and there's a victim. And the villain in Marxism is capitalism, and the working guy is always the victim. And here, the victim is always the woman, and the villain is always the man. And since my own research proved that wasn't the case, I found that I was immediately branded as an anti-feminist. And once you're branded that way, then you start doing more research, and you are on the defense a great deal of the time. So that's pretty well started very early in my career, and my research kept going because I kept seeing indications that society as a whole was suffering from these assumptions, and the assumptions were pandemic. Gerard, you find yourself on LinkedIn and Facebook battling against these ideas, and you say you can't make headway because people don't listen to reason. But you can't reason people out of a position that they didn't get into through reason to begin with. These assumptions that Well, it's an old saying, but it's true. If people accept certain mantras or certain um, uh, uh, presumptions on faith, which is what feminism is, it's a faith-based ideology, then you can't reason them out of it. You cannot say, but look, here are the statistics. You know, you could never argue with a Marxist by using data or by saying, hey, look, socialism doesn't work. Look, here's Venezuela. Here's, this country, that country. They've all failed. No, 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 no. Because these are utopian projects. They believe that life can be perfectible, but it has to be done by changing human nature. And that's their premise. So when you're dealing with that kind of an ideology, it's very difficult to argue through reason. You won't persuade a lot of people through reason if they have a deep faith in this ideology.
Okay, well, terrific. Let's see what we can do today. So, Jesse, you've got the first question for Barbara, I believe. Is that correct?
Yes, and that was a perfect lead into this question. So, are we ready?
I'm ready.
All right. What do you think are the risks of a power vacuum if feminism were to collapse?
If feminism were to collapse, well, that's an interesting premise. I'm trying to imagine how that could happen.
Well, I mean, I can't say, I think when you go out in the world and talk to a lot of women and really get how they feel, they don't always align really with feminism. So if we were to suppose that somehow we could change all of their minds, would there be something else that would fill that void that's worse, that's better?
That's a good question. I'm trying to imagine. I'm thinking that this, in a way, this pandemic is a kind of pivotal moment for families and for women and men in general, because a lot of lives have been deeply there's been a great upheaval in people's working lives, and now you've got parents at home, men and women at home, working from home, rediscovering what it is to be full-time parents, both of them, and a lot of women are, well, I see some feminist writers are saying, oh, this is terrible for women, this business of being forced back into the home, because look, now they're having to cook and they're having to clean and they're having to take care of their children and they're having, all these things. But a lot of other women are saying, this isn't so bad. Their children are happy. They're working together with their husbands to, parent together. And they're finding that there's a kind of, I know that, for example, my son put on Facebook, he happens to work from home anyways, he's a journalist, but his wife is a high-powered lawyer and she works for a gigantic international company and her hours are long, and now she's working from home too. Their nanny can't come to the house because, right, she's not allowed because of the virus. So, and he put on his Facebook page, he said, this is the 12th night in a row that we've had dinner as a family together, because normally she comes home after the nanny has given the kids dinner, right? So, and he said, and I have to say, it's been a wonderful experience for us as a family. And I was very glad to see that post. I thought, that's amazing. I noticed that when the feminist writers are saying, oh, this is so bad for women, blah, 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 we're being forced back into, there's a lot of blowback. And people are saying, shut up. You know what? We have a crisis here. And if that's your concern, then, you're being very selfish and egotistical. This is not about feminism. This is about everybody pulling together, everybody doing their part. And I do agree with you that most women are not feminists. I'm not saying most women are anti-feminist, but most women are not ideological at all. They just want their lives to be good, and they do what comes naturally to them to make a good life for themselves. The feminists are all elitists. They all come out of the same academic cookie cutter gender studies box. With the universities shut down, as a matter of fact, it's a lot quieter, because we're not We're not seeing all the pussy hats and the women's marches. And I'm telling you, I'm enjoying the respite, I have to tell you. And it's not just the feminists. I'm enjoying not hearing from the microaggressionists and the, Black Lives Matter and the, the anti-Zionists and the all the other social justice warriors. They are all in the same intellectual frame of the idea that you can make a perfect world if you can only change the power structure, and if you can only get rid of the villain who's had the power all along. So for the feminists, it's the men. For the Marxists, it's the it's the capitalists. For the blacks, it's the whites. For the so it's there's always this somebody getting in the way of utopia. They do, and that is the common thread for all ideologues of that kind, is that there is this perfect world out there beckoning, and we could have that perfect world if it weren't for these people that are trying to hold us back from it. And if we could just control them or get rid of them or push them aside, then the world would be a great place. And when you consider what's at stake, that we could have a perfect world, well, if we take away the rights from these people, or if we trample on that, isn't that justified? I mean, if you could have a perfect world, wouldn't you feel that was Lenin's idea, right? Just a bullet in the back of the head. I mean, even if they were associated with somebody who had the wrong idea, because they were standing in the way of the perfect world. So, sorry, I forgot your question. Oh, yeah.
I actually want to touch on the
power vacuum. Yeah, the power vacuum. Okay, who's going to fill that vacuum? Interesting things going on right now. The feminists are right now very, very, very threatened already by somebody who is looking to overtake them. That's the trans activist movement. Have you been following this? Fascinating. And I'm actually finding, for the first time in my life, my first time in many years, I'm finding myself, politics makes strange bedfellows, right? I'm finding myself on the side of the feminists, or a certain kind of feminists, the radical feminists, who are saying, no, a man cannot be a woman. I mean, you may think you're a woman, you can act like a woman, you can dress like a woman and all that, but you're not a woman. So they're saying, we're a woman, we're a woman.
I'll just pick you up on that. The interesting thing is that most trans people in the United States are actually female to male. So it's interesting that you
are
see.
Are they really? Are you sure? Really?
That's what I understand. Is that
really?
If you look at Leonard Sax's book, Why Gender Matters, there's a huge difference between trans men and women.
Oh, absolutely.
So most trans women who were biologically male end up transitioning back to being male because they're essentially gay men who mistakenly identified as women, whereas trans men who were biologically women tend to stay living as men. So, for all of the uproar of trans women using restrooms, in reality, men probably stand at the urinal next to trans men regularly and never even know it. But I agree with you that the trans movement is a huge creates a huge problem for feminism and breaks
a huge
it in,
problem, huge. And
breaks
a
it
lot
into
of them don't even,
factions.
a lot of them don't even realize it because feminists, they've gotten it into their head that they have to be inclusive of all women, and they've drunk the Kool-Aid that these men who identify as women, they must be accepted as women. But the people that are thinking, have their heads on straight, are the radical feminists who are saying, no. Women are women. These are men moving into our spaces because they identify as women, and we are being erased. There's that hashtag, women erasure, and they're absolutely right. They're correct. So you look at athletics, you look at the sports fields, and you see these biological men trampling, commanding the podium because they are obviously, and we're supposed to accept this as, well, they say they're women, so they're women. But so the radical feminists they're the ones that are being excluded. Suddenly they're understanding what it's like to be an anti-feminist because they're the ones that are getting booed and hissed and told, deplatformed. They are kicked off Facebook. They're getting the same treatment that we guys have been known for years and years and years because they are saying the obvious. So I find this all very fascinating. It's who's on top in the victimization hierarchy. Like it's a race for the top. And what is the top? The people who are most likely to commit suicide. So right now, it's the trans people because they say, if you don't recognize us as women, not trans women, then we're going to commit suicide. And so it'll all be on you,
But aren't men, biological men, the most likely to commit suicide?
Yeah, but for male reasons, not because they're not accepted as female. That's for other reasons. But that they don't want to hear about that. That's very interesting, right? I'm glad you brought that up. Okay, let's go with that. Biological men are absolutely 3 times or 4 times more likely to commit suicide than women. And there's lots of reasons for that. And we all know them, so we don't have to rehearse those reasons. But when you talk about that, people say, well, yeah, but they probably deserve to. I mean, they can't get it through their
toxic
head.
masculinity. It's toxic masculinity.
Yes, that's toxic masculinity.
If they were more female,
even with this virus, 70% of the victims are male.
Yep.
And there was somebody in the United States. I think she's some kind of official, some state official said, it's terrible that women are suffering from domestic violence and all this stuff. But the good news is that more men are dying from this virus than women. I mean, and she got a lot of blowback, but that's the kind of attitude people have to male death. But when a trans person says, if I can't, they're saying, never mind the people who have this coronavirus, I need my transition surgery, and if I can't get it, I'm at risk of suicide. And hey, we've got this pandemic and all you can think about is your phalloplasty? No, sorry. Or no, it's the other. What's the other one?
Yeah. I don't know the names of them.
The first one. And I'm thinking, wow, what kind of narcissism is this? But I noticed that the word suicide keeps coming up again and again when you talk about trans activism. Oh no, if you don't let your 3-year-old, transition socially, that kid could commit suicide right away. That's how they guilt the parents. So when it's a question of trans suicide, we have to be so totally full of angst and anguish. And meanwhile, when it's, men committing suicide, whatever. But these are men.
That's because I think the reason is that you can blame male suicide on masculinity. But when a man is focused on being feminine and they're the highest number of people killing themselves, all of a sudden it conflicts with the ideology. So, as a man, if a man kills himself, that's what you'll be told. Well, look, we can stop male suicide by making men more feminine. But the feminine men are the most likely to commit suicide.
Well, because there's a host of other problems going on there. So it's not because they're more feminine. It's this is gender dysphoria is a whole thing unto itself, which I have no wish to get into, except to notice the ironies. And some of the irony, and one of the ironies is that we must take their tendency to have suicidal ideation extremely seriously, but we are not supposed to take seriously the actual data, the actual statistics on men and boys whose the statistics of suicide are just there. They're apparent. This is not threatening to commit suicide. This is real suicides. But that's not of any particular interest to feminists, I notice.
So it's interesting. If I had have guessed at what you would have come up with, I would have thought that really the power vacuum would have either been filled by men or by Islam. But it's interesting to see that I'd never really considered the power vacuum being filled by feminists, feminizing men who then erase women.
I really believe the last couple of years I've devoted a lot of time to reading and learning about the trans activism phenomenon, because, and I should say, as I always do when I discuss this issue, most trans people just want to live their lives. They are not political at all. But the trans activists at the top, the people that are driving this ideology and that are insisting on teaching it to children in schools, when you look at the curricula in public schools on gender fluidity, all these theories, these are not scientific theories, these are ideological theories. The intent is to erase the differences, erase biology. But in fact, you can't erase biology. And what the radical feminists are saying is, but if you erase the idea of biology, then you're basically saying that women are not separate beings at all. And that, like, for instance, they won't say now in some public schools, it's just absurd. In some public schools, they won't say, when they discuss menstruation, for example, they don't say girls or women, they say people who menstruate, so that they won't antagonize trans women or trans, it's so women feel, who am I? I'm not a person who menstruates. I'm a woman, and the way they play around with words, I'm very insistent. When I write my pieces, I always spell out trans woman as one word, because if you put trans woman, then you're using trans as a modifier rather than as part of the word. But I won't do that, because to me, a woman is a woman and a trans woman is a totally separate category. And I'm very much insistent on that category. And I won't call myself a cis woman either, because I don't think I should have to have a modifier. I'm just a woman and I am the norm. So don't put me in a box as if it was equal to the 0.5% of the population who, have this.
La La Land.
Exactly.
La La Land.
Well, I won't even say that, because there are gender dysphoric people. It is what I call it, an affliction. I know I'm not supposed to, but I take it seriously. There are people that this is a very, it's not something you can be talked out of. I don't know where it comes from. I don't know if it's biologically implanted. I have no idea, but I take them very seriously if they're persistent, and if that's the only thing they cannot be happy, and they gotta do that as adults. That's an adult decision, fine with me, and I respect them. I've met several trans people. I'm totally comfortable with them. They're comfortable with themselves. But the trans activists are not satisfied for you to relate to these people as just have a normal relationship with them. They're very insistent that you use their terminology and that you admit that that a trans woman is a woman. And if you don't, there's somebody in Canada, she's a trans activist. She's tried to take somebody to the Human Rights Commission because that person had a sign in a demonstration saying a woman is a woman. So she tried to take her to the Human Rights Tribunal to have her penalized with a fine, and they managed to get the funding taken away from a rape crisis center, the Vancouver Rape Crisis Center, because the center would not allow trans women to be counselors. They wanted to be counselors. You know, it's like they want the baker to bake the cake, right? Like it's not good enough that you just accept them. You have to validate them. You have to say that it's an honor and a privilege and a wonderful thing to be trans. They're not satisfied. So these are ideologues. And by the way, they have tremendous power. They are governing the school systems, the curricula in the school system. They're teaching, this genderbread thing and teaching children, there's really no such thing as boys and girls because you can be anything. You might be on the spectrum. They're teaching terrible things. They're confusing children. They're using children as guinea pigs. They have the police in England are arresting people who have said that, who won't admit that a woman is a woman. There's just so much going on in this area, and it's horrifying. It's like a social contagion. And these activists are now pushing aside. The feminists no longer have center stage, really. They are the governing, the reigning, the queens, you might say, of the kings and queens, of the new kings and queens of the ideological summit.
Interesting.
I think that's a perfect introduction to Eric's question, because it follows on from really your response there, Barbara. So shoot, Eric.
So,
Hi.
where do you see society in 20 years if feminism takes its current trajectory, the way it is now? 20 years from now, what does society look like?
Oh gosh. Well, I'm not very good at predictions. I predicted that Trump would never be elected, so that was that was my last public prediction. So 20 years from now, well, we're a very deeply divided society. We are. I do believe Western society is deeply divided, is self-loathing. That the current trend is leftward. Well, it's very divided between. There is a huge left. The dominant institutions in our society are all governed by left-wing ideologues. So society in general is tending leftward. There is a hardcore resistance movement to that, and so they tend to vote for and support people like Trump, disruptors who are populists and who are very anti-left. But I don't see any reconciliation movement. I don't see any movement that is in the center. I see people being forced further and further apart because you have to choose your lane. So I do see a leftward movement that is probably going to succeed eventually in the United States, at least. I don't know about Australia. I think Australia is a pretty resilient, kind of has a spirit that we don't have in North America.
We have the worst. We have the worst of feminism here.
I know you do, but don't you also have a sort of spirit of resistance to being told what to do? And no?
I think that a few generations of indoctrination can easily erase that. And I'm shocked myself as an Australian to see a lot of the things that happen. And I think a lot of it just comes down to people just not being willing to reason. I've had friends I went to high school with who, at high school, there was one particular girl who was actually sexually assaulted. And at the time, when I was 18 years old, she came to me for help. And then I hadn't spoken to her for 20 years, and I saw a post about domestic violence, and I said, look, you know, men can be victims too. She called me a misogynist and blocked me.
Well, that doesn't surprise me. Yeah. As I said, you know, culture is not, culture does not evolve according to reason. Culture begins in religious, you know, tribes. I mean, the Western culture is an outgrowth of Christian values and Christian principles. Other countries are outgrowths of Islamic values, other religions. So that forms your basic idea of what's right, what's wrong, what your aspirations are, what offends you, what doesn't. And cultures evolve, but there's always a thread. The common thread is the religion that gave birth to the culture. So what you've got now is Islamic culture that is still has confidence in their religion and in their values, but you've got Christian societies, Western culture, that decided to get rid of religion because they felt that religion was the source of so much. I mean, it's not that religion wasn't the source of some bad stuff, but it was also the source of good stuff too. But they decided to throw out the bathwater and the baby. And that's why the left is so committed. Look, you have to, you know, you throw out one belief system, it creates a vacuum. And what it invites is not reason. Reason doesn't fill that vacuum. Another belief does. So the belief, the faith that drives what we're up against is basically the leftist vision of this Marxist utopia that people can be, this idea of equality, inclusion, a global kind of brotherhood of man. It's an ideal that has never been realized, that never can be realized, because it would need human nature to change utterly in order for that to happen. And human nature can be modified and tamed and constrained, but it can't be changed to something that it is not. And all of these ideologies depend on people becoming something that they're not. Women are women, men are men. We're imperfect human beings, and we shouldn't be aiming for a perfect society. We should be aiming for better societies. That's the conservative, you know, conservatism is not an ideology, it's a point of view. It's a perspective, it's a way of looking at the world. And it's a humbler vision because it knows that man is imperfect, humankind is imperfect, that we have to strive and keep striving and be humble about what we can do and what we can't. The left has a very arrogant perception of the capabilities of man, and they're not reasonable, but they claim to believe in reason. They claim to be guided by reason, but they're not. So that's why it's so difficult to reason with them.
So Barbara, if you...
I actually want to touch on something real quick, Gerard.
Yeah.
I think we're missing something here in terms of a deep cultural principle in relationship building between men and women. The art of thoughtfulness from men. I think feminism will kill that, ultimately. That it's going to discourage men to be less thoughtful and less romantic in their interactions with women. And
well, I think, yeah, what you're talking about is the idea, this is basically the chivalric idea. Men want to be thoughtful and men want to be protective.
Correct.
Yes. Well, I think this whole idea that the exchange, the code of interconnectedness between men and women was based on a principle that women are the weaker sex, but that men, there's a kind of bargain that was made between the sexes that men would protect women And in turn, women would be loyal to and helpmates, to men, and help them to achieve what they could not, and to build, the shelters and the structures, and to do the heavy lifting of society, and that women, for their part, would be the nurturers and the helpmeets. And
it's a complementary relationship.
Yeah, exactly. And it still can be, even when, and I'm certainly not one to say that we should be going back to, oh yes, women should be in the home and cooking and baking all day and not go into the workforce. I don't believe that. I think women have every right to achieve what they can and to do. But this idea that they are interchangeable, that men and women are interchangeable just because they can both perform many of the same functions in society. Many functions are interchangeable. Men could cook as well or better than women, and women can certainly be great accountants and lawyers and doctors and all of that. But that doesn't mean that in their relationship, in their personal, private relationships, that they don't function best when there is a certain code of behavior that recognizes the different spheres. I think every successful marriage that I know, and I'm including my children's marriages, it's very interesting to me that educated women, they're out there in the workforce. My daughter and my daughter-in-law both have great jobs and everything else, but in the home, they're in a way quite traditional. And the men do a lot of the same traditional jobs that my father used to do, and because they know the secret, they've got the code down, and they're not, they don't bother with ideology. What they want is the best home that can be made so that their children flourish, and just kind of naturally they slip into quite traditional roles at home. They're very happy about that. They don't, because they're secure and they're confident women, and they are making their way in the world very successfully. But I think a lot of women are unhappy today because they missed the memo that you can have a career, but you can also have a wonderful life, a womanly life, that it's no sin to think in a womanly fashion and to invite a man's affection that is coupled with the wish to protect, the wish to be romantic, the wish to nurture you as a female partner. That, so the yin and the yang, I mean, to me it seems very obvious, but then, I'm old. I
get it too. Okay,
so you're young and you get it, but not a lot of young people do. And I think a lot of men are afraid of women. I think they're very afraid. That's why there's so many men that won't commit, because they don't know what's down the road for them. Like they're vulnerable. They're vulnerable as fathers. They're vulnerable. Their kids could be taken away. They're not stupid. They look around. They see stories. They could be accused, falsely accused. The deck is stacked against them. Sorry, I'm rambling a bit, I think.
No, not at all, Barbara.
I'm jumping from one thing to another. I know there's a time constraint here. I think we've gone over, but I appreciated the question. But I don't know if I can predict accurately, but I don't see any change in direction. By now, I had expected that feminism would have peaked and been on the downturn. And yet, on we go. The forces continue to radiate out. Although I do think this trans movement has thrown a real spanner in the works, because it's caught a lot of feminists short. They don't realize that you know how the revolutions eat their children? They're getting eaten by their own revolution.
Yeah. Enemy of my enemy.
Well, you look at people like Germaine Greer, and I was listening to your
Oh yeah, she got pilloried. Yeah.
And that's the thing is, Germaine Greer ends up like the Trotsky of feminism. It's fascinating to watch.
Yeah, this is the 70th anniversary of George Orwell's 1984. So, an animal. I've been thinking a lot about Animal Farm these days, and Yeah, some
Absolutely.
people are equal, but some people, no, everybody's equal, but some people are more equal than others.
Yeah.
That's kind of what Marxism about, but that's also what feminism is about too. You know, men and women are equal, but women are more equal than men. Like that's basically sums it up, right?
We'll just
Absolutely.
brush aside that you compared Jermaine Greer to a pig, but
I think she'd
here's
mind.
your,
I don't think she'd mind. She has a sense of humor.
all right, now here's the bonus question. The bonus question is something we added in at the last minute, and we're going to ask everyone this, so it's not going to be a secret going forward. If you could change one thing in society before you you left the planet, what would you change?
Wow, that's I think the hardest question of all. Uh, what would I change? Um, I think it would probably have something to do with with robotics, or I think we're going down the road to some very strange things with um, genetic reconfiguration and cloning and artificial uteruses being implanted in men, and some very strange stuff is coming down the road, and I think that worries me, I think, quite a bit, and I think I might stop that. I might.
I understand. So basically, you've read a bit too much Philip K. Dick, and
Maybe. I actually haven't. I just see some of the people, speculating on what could be. I mean, benign things like getting rid of diseases, by finding the gene, that would be good. But then you have, like, in the womb, implanting genes from, for you want an athletic kid, so you implant a gene from one. I don't know. It started with sperm donors, and I always thought, oh, that's a bad idea. I never I think sperm donorship sort of threw me off. The whole idea of creating human beings that only have half a heritage, like they have a phantom parent. This always seemed to me like a very weird and bad idea. And everything else that comes from that. I mean, it's if that's allowable, then all kinds of other genetic stuff is allowable, and I'm worried about that.
Slippery slope.
Like what?
A slippery slope.
Yes, it is. I think it is. Yes.
Barbara, you've set an incredibly high bar with this first show. I thought people would be running for the hills if we asked them, because this was going to be a train wreck. But the bar you've set is just I couldn't have hoped for a better first show. So,
thank you so much. That's such a nice compliment. Thank you. I've enjoyed myself very much. I hope this is a big success. I hope you have lots of terrific, entertaining segments, and I'll look forward to watching them.
All right, terrific. Well, thanks for your time, Barbara, and stay safe.
Oh yeah, you too. Well, I don't have to tell you to stay safe. You've got like miles and miles and miles. You've got half of Australia there, surrounding your house. So
we should worry about Eric probably in New York.
Oh, New York, yes. New York. No, don't go outside. Don't go anywhere. And all of you, don't ever eat bat soup. That's really not a good idea. Texas, you've got a lot of land there too, so we're okay.
Good. We're pretty spread out.
Good.
The barbecue sauce would kill anything.
Yeah, exactly. And the beer.
All right. Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you so much,
Gerard, Jesse, Eric. It was great to be with you. Thank you so much.
Likewise.
Okay.
Bye.